Hi, welcome to a new episode in the Internet Surfer, hosting the most horror and creepiest stories from Reddit. Please don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy.
What is the scariest incident that scarred you for life? Horror stories from Reddit Paranormal. Episode 1. When I was about 9 or 10, I lived on a dirt road called Virgil Langford Road in Oconee County, GA. We lived in a house right next to the Langfords used to hang out with their kids Jeff and Amanda. I always assumed they just owned all that land. Anyways, down the road near where the Oconee connector is now headed towards the Walmart, there used to be an old 2-story house that straight up looked like the house from the X-Files episode Home. All gray shingles. Looked like at least 100 years old. I am sure. It was just a spooky house the bus drove past. One day this guy moved in with 3 kids. I only remember one kid's name was PM, but we started hanging out. Usually in the general area and never in their spooky old house. One day a sleepover was arranged, and I went to spend the night with PM in the spooky house. The yard was a mess, all overgrown. Half the lights inside did not cut on, random old junk everywhere that was clearly in the house when they moved in. It was very dark, dusty, dank and old looking, and we were absolutely forbidden to go upstairs. PM's dad had to work overnight and my house was just a mile down the road, so I was just us 4 kids in the house. I asked PG about upstairs, and he said he had never been up there, and he would not go up there anyways because there's weird sounds. I did not think much of it. I just assumed, ill boy obeying dad under fear of death. He said it sounded like someone walking around dragging a bed or something, and when he heard it, they all just gathered in the main room, which I think was a dining room. Of course, I did not believe any of that, but the house was spooky, so I did not question it like I would have if I were older. Sure enough, after being there a few hours you could hear someone walking around upstairs. Stomps, creaks, and thumps. It sounded like someone dragging a heavy bag across the floor and it getting caught and bumping over loose boards. It even sounded like a couple old creaky doors opened and closed. I was like, no man, your dad must have come home, and he told me to look outside. His truck was not there. It only lasted for around 10 minutes, but it was pretty frickin' weird. I never went back in their house again. We lived in an actively haunted house for a few years, and I have had a lot of sightings there. Someone had just died, and we were renting out their house through their son-in-law. We had plenty of stories, from floating orbs to boxes being thrown to the floor on the kitchen to light bulbs breaking randomly. My mother always states it was never haunted, but I think she did not want to admit it. I was 9 with my mother and we had just run into the Great California earthquake. The entire house was shaking left and right, and we were struggling to get out. My mom was picking up a bookshelf and beyond it stood our way out. After she moved the shelf out of the way, we both ran for the front door and her bike was thrown from the ground to in front of the door. It was already on the floor and out of our way when it jarringly flipped over to block our path. My mom yelled, "Oh, come on," before throwing it aside, and we both ran out of the house. We moved very soon after that day due to earthquake damages. It is one of those weird stories where you want to say it was just your imagination, that weird things happen during an earthquake, but I watched the entire thing happen in front of me and I know that was the moment that finally spooked my mom. I've had a few small paranormal things happen when I was around my little brother, who was always seeing paranormal stuff. But the biggest thing that happened that we both experienced together was one day in the summer. We were sitting in the living room, and being young, dumb kids, we decided to play with our mom's Ouija board. Nothing happened with the board, but suddenly, in the kitchen, it sounded like all the dishes had suddenly fallen onto the floor. There was super loud crashing and banging, and nobody in the kitchen at the time. So, we immediately jumped up and went to see what happened. But when we got there, everything looked normal. Nothing was out of place. We ran into our mom's room to ask if she had heard the commotion, but she had not. We immediately put the board away and never touched it again. This happened when I was around 14 or 15, and I had just moved into a bedroom in the basement, for a little extra separation from a not-so-good home life. Evil step-parent. I had been in that room for a few weeks at this point with no issues. The room was a simple square, but one wall of the room was a big closet. It had 2 sets of double doors to it, no walls or anything separating the inside, so you could walk all the way through it. Anyway, there were a few days in a row where I would wake up in the middle of the night, like always within a few minutes of 3 a.m., think 2:56 a.m., 3:01 a.m., etc., with the feeling like I was being awoken from a deep sleep. I could feel myself being pulled from my deep slumber but could never place why. Every time when I woke up, the entire house would be completely, dead silent. Like I could hear my own breathing and heartbeat like it was super loud. So, it was not a sound that woke me up, what was it? My dad was not trying to wake me, my cat was asleep by my feet. What woke me up? This happened a couple of nights in a row, until the last night. Same thing happened, I felt myself being pulled awake by something, awoke to dead silence around 2:58 a.m., and I sat up. My closet door, the one closest to my bed, started rattling. I assumed it was my cat, who did try to get into the closet a lot, but he was curled up at my feet, but also staring right at the closet door. I stared back at the door in horror. It rattled a bit before slowly opening about 3 to 4 inches, then just stopped. I was frozen to my bed. I could not move. I just sat there, terrified of whatever could be behind those doors. After what felt like an eternity, my cat, who was curious, went to the door, sniffing, and stuck his face inside. He did not seem alarmed, and nothing bad happened to him, so I took this chance to sprint to the light and switch it on as fast as possible. I stood at the door for too long before gathering my courage to investigate. I searched the closet, and my room, and there was no explanation. I did not want to wake up my parent for this, since I had no proof, so I just went back to sleep eventually. And it never happened again. I slept peacefully in that room for years after that. Still the scariest thing that ever happened to me that I could not explain. Gets my heart pounding just thinking about it. I have had a lot of experiences, nothing in the house I live in now, moved in 3 years ago. The most memorable one I had was when we moved into a new build that was built on desert land. From the beginning I always felt a dark presence in my master bedroom closet for some reason. In the middle of the night when I would get up to go to the bathroom, I always envisioned red eyes staring at me, but there was not a door on the closet so I could not close it. I never had anything happen or saw anything, but I had gotten to the point where I was angry, I was feeling this way and one day stood in the doorway and said, "You are not welcome here, leave." Not too long after I was home in my bedroom on the phone with my mom talking to her folding laundry. I was mid-sentence when I saw a shadow person-looking thing walk out of my closet toward the shower, dead end. I told my mom to hold on, set the phone down and ran into the bathroom and nothing was there or in the shower. After that I never felt that heavy negative feeling from my closet again. At 11 or 12 in my old apartment my mom and I woke up to hear racket downstairs. We met up in the kitchen and watched in silence as our bird cage with our birds in it was shaking like it was having a seizure. Like violently bashing itself against the wall over and over. The birds were inside freaking out. Nothing else was shaking in the room and there was no earthquake, not even in an area that typically gets them anyway. This continued for a bit, then the metal bar from our electric baseboard heater ripped itself from the wall and began bashing itself against the wall and the rest of the heater. It was loud and we just stared until it suddenly stopped. We went back to bed. Never spoke of it again that I can remember. I was very depressed at that point on my life and just wanted some sleep. My ability to care much was compromised a bit. Other weird stuff also happened, so it was not entirely unexpected. That baseboard heater was dented for the rest of the time I lived there. Not a dream. That cemented that some paranormal stuff is real for me. When I was like 15, I went to the Faculty of Medicine, to the amphitheater where the students practiced dissecting bodies, as part of a homework. The brownish bodies impressed me a lot. To think that they once walked and talked like me, had names and friends and plans and illusions. And the students were cutting them down, listening to music, joking around, and throwing bodily parts at each other while saying, "Think fast." It all seemed so disrespectful to me and made me feel very empathic towards the deceased. After that we went back to school. We were still in high school. I began having an allergic reaction. I could not breathe, my arms twisted over my chest. My friends took me to the infirmary where I got 2 shots of a medicine that I did not bother to ask what it was. At one point I got very scared and thought I was going to die because even after the shots I just kept on getting worse. I wanted to fade into a red and black spiral. When I thought, I don't want to die. Because I could not speak, a thundering voice spoke in my head and yelled at me, "You are not going to die," but in Spanish, my native language. It immediately calmed me, and I thought, "You're right, I'm not going to die," so confident on what I heard, not really thinking, "Wow, someone spoke to me," but more like a confident acceptation of, "Yeah, you're right, it will be okay." The medicine still took a few minutes after that to kick in and the spiral faded away instantly. My conventional explanation is that it was just an allergic reaction, but I did not eat anything that day out of the ordinary. My paranormal explanation is that a dead from the faculty clung to me and tried to kill me. Something in my empathy opened a connection somehow. These are bodies that no one claims and thus end up in the medicine school for kids to practice with them. They are either criminals, addicts, or just solitaries homeless. It also took me many years to acknowledge the voice that I had heard because who would believe me? It was a one-time event. It appeared right when I thought that was it for me and had the power to calm me although the medicine had not kicked in yet. It also spoke to me in second person, as in, "You are not going to die." It was noticeably clear and sounded like what you would expect a supernatural voice to sound like aggressive but not cruel or scary. It sounded like many voices, male and female, perfectly coordinated talking through a loud distorted speaker. To this day it was either God or my guardian angel intervening directly for me. Thinking of it makes me smile and makes me feel so grateful. When I was about 12, my family moved into an old house that had been empty for years. The first night, I heard soft footsteps outside my bedroom door, but when I opened it, no one was there. Over the next few weeks, the footsteps became more frequent, always stopping just outside my door. One night, I woke up to the sound of whispering, low and unintelligible, coming from the corner of my room. When I turned on the light, I saw nothing, but the air felt heavy, like someone was watching me. The scariest moment came a few nights later. I woke up in the middle of the night, unable to move, with a crushing weight on my chest. In the darkness, I could just make out the silhouette of a figure standing at the foot of my bed. It was tall and shadowy, with no distinguishable features, just a dark presence. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. The figure slowly leaned closer, and as it did, the temperature in the room dropped. Just as it was about to touch me, the figure vanished, and I could move again. I never saw the figure after that night, but the fear of waking up to that presence still haunts me. Even now, I cannot sleep in total darkness. I always keep a light on, just in case. When I was 7, my family, mom and 2 older brothers, 13 and 15, moved house. We moved to a street that was built on old tram tracks from around the 1900s. The line of terraced properties themselves were fairly new. When we moved in, they were only around 15 years old max. All the properties have a rear garden that is divided by a meter-tall wooden fence. Each garden has a shared rear wall that is a 7-foot tall and made of concrete. This wall separates the properties from the grounds of the local park. This is all relevant, I promise. As a kid, I kept myself entertained. The age gap between my brothers and I at that age was enough to be left out of things, and my parents were recently divorced. I would make up games and act out imaginary scenes. It was not uncommon to find me playing by myself in the back garden. We had pet rabbits that lived in a hutch that was up against the back wall mentioned earlier. Being the curious child I was, I used to like to stand on the hutch and look over the wall into the park and people watch. I remember it being a warm night, and the sun was setting a bit later in the day. I do not remember the time exactly, but with the way the daylight plays in my memory, it was around 7 p.m. I was out in the garden, people watching from my rabbit hutch vantage point when I had the sudden urge to look over my right shoulder. With the way my house is laid out, the kitchen is at the rear of the house. If I were to enter the house, would open the door and walk through the kitchen. My neighbor's house, which would be on my right as I looked back, is a bit different. Their sitting room is at the rear instead. So, I look over my right shoulder and my neighbor's back door is open. There are no lights on, so it is dark in the sitting room, and I cannot make anything out, but I know they have a sofa facing out and it would be where I was looking. I see two red dots, spaced apart and not changing distance from one another, floating in the middle of this black room. I remember squinting, trying to figure out what I am seeing. These two dots move in a smooth arc to the right and upwards, as if they were eyes on a face of someone standing up from the sofa. As they move, they get a bit closer to the door and I can make out nothing except for a dark silhouette. I freak out and run back inside, all the way to the front of the house where our sitting room is located, to tell my mom. She assures me it is nothing and I head back outside. I climb back onto the rabbit hutch and immediately look behind me again. The figure with its red eyes is now standing in the doorway of their house, looking out into the garden. I nope once more back into the house and this time I do not go back outside. For years, I forgot about this experience, but I have always been afraid of the dark. I especially hate looking out of windows at night, particularly into the back garden. Something jogged my memory of it a few years ago and every time I talk about it, it makes me want to cry because it scared me so much. I still remember every detail of that evening and I wonder what it was I saw. My neighbors still live there, and I am too scared to ask them if they have experienced anything or if they have an explanation for what I saw. When I was 7. My mom and I had just come cross-country to stay with my grandmother. She was a monster herself, but different story. We ended up staying in her spare room, which she used as a third closet for all of her over-shopping, cloths, old dolls, jewelry boxes, etc., herder. Every night starting on the first night I began to see a pair of what looked like glowing red eyes. I was not a stranger to seeing weird things, but these spooked me. At first, I tried to tell myself they were my imagination or some impossible reflection in a pitch-black room. But it happened every night and they would be coming from a different spot each night. At first, they would stay in one spot all night, but after the first week I began to actively watch them move about the room, always staring at me, never breaking my eye contact unless it dodged behind something. Always silent despite the mess. By week 3 I was terrified as it had begun to inch closer to the bed at night rather than around the perimeter of the room. I finally got the guts to wake my mom one night as it was approaching the bed again. As she woke, it retreated, but did not disappear. My mom saw it after I woke her and explained. She froze. She eventually got up and turned on a light to investigate, but it was gone. But turn the lights off again and by the time she is back in bed, they've appeared and are watching and darting again. We checked the room for days after to try and find a rational source of the two red glowing eyes. We never could. After that each night we would huddle together and watch the thing dart around the room. Watching us. Eventually it got too much and we had to move downstairs into the living room. Weird stuff happened down there too, but nothing like that. This is tame compared to most, but I can remember every single detail of it happening even though I was only 7 years old. We had moved to a new house that was a split plan, so my parents felt extremely far away, lol. I woke up in the night and could not go back to sleep and started feeling scared for no reason. I got up out of bed and walked towards my sister's room. I heard some sort of soft noise from my bedroom and turned around to look. My parents had left the hall light on, and I could see my entire bed from the hallway. As I watched, the top sheet of the bed slowly started to slide up towards the pillow, as if someone was making the bed in slow motion. Then suddenly, the sheets jerked down to the bottom of the bed and then up over the pillow again, then down, then up, very quickly. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears, and I was so scared I could not move. I wanted to call out for my sister but could not get her name out. I can understand something clearly at last. Turquoise sheets, I can picture the way my pillow was laying, I can feel the hair on my arm standing up, every detail. Even though I could not yell her name, I eventually managed to push out some sort of gargling wail of terror, and my sister came running out to the hallway. She told me I had imagined it, older siblings, am I right, and to go back to bed. Instead, I crept into my parents' room and slept on the floor next to their bed. I slept with my light on in my room for a long time after that. This is tame compared to most, but I can remember every single detail of it happening even though I was only 7 years old. We had moved to a new house that was a split plan, so my parents felt extremely far away, lol. I woke up in the night and could not go back to sleep and started feeling scared for no reason. I got up out of bed and walked towards my sister's room. I heard some sort of soft noise from my bedroom and turned around to look. My parents had left the hall light on, and I could see my entire bed from the hallway. As I watched, the top sheet of the bed slowly started to slide up towards the pillow, as if someone was making the bed in slow motion. Then suddenly, the sheets jerked down to the bottom of the bed and then up over the pillow again, then down, then up, very quickly. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears, and I was so scared I could not move. I wanted to call out for my sister but could not get her name out. I can understand something clearly at last. Turquoise sheets, I can picture the way my pillow was laying, I can feel the hair on my arm standing up, every detail. Even though I could not yell her name, I eventually managed to push out some sort of gargling wail of terror, and my sister came running out to the hallway. She told me I had imagined it, older siblings, am I right, and to go back to bed. Instead, I crept into my parents' room and slept on the floor next to their bed. I slept with my light on in my room for a long time after that. 11. I would not say I am scarred for life, but the most memorable scary thing that happened to me was when my daughter was around 1.5 years old. I was renting a house that years earlier someone was shot in the living room after attempting to break in through the window coming in from the sun porch. So many weird paranormal things happened there. I would hear strange noises, doors opened on their own, would hear knocking and no one would be at the door, I would hear dogs barking and no dog to be found anywhere. But the scariest incident was with my daughter. She was going through a phase that everywhere we went, she would wave and say, "Hi." So cute and sweetly to everyone we came across. One evening I was laying on our sofa with her sitting across my tummy bouncing her and singing. The sofa was positioned at an angle in front of the door, leading to the sun porch. I held her up like Superman and lowered her. She was smiling and laughing. Suddenly, she goes quiet, looks behind the couch, and starts waving and says, "Hi."
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.